My daughter-in-law told me to pack my things and leave at my own son's memorial. 3 weeks later, I opened his old phone with a passcode hidden in the lullaby I used to sing to him, pressed play on a video he'd recorded the night before he died, and watched a room full of people go silent as every lie unraveled at once. I'm 70 this winter, 69 when all this began. The name is Nadia, but the kids on our street call me Babushka because I bake too much bread and won't stop foisting jars of cherry jam on everyone. I used to think the worst cruelty you could fit into a few words was a doctor saying, "We did everything we could." I was wrong. "Don't be dramatic, pack your things and leave the house," is a small sentence with edges sharper than glass. My son, Daniel, should have been the one telling me where to go. He was the kindest person I'd ever met, the sort who carried jumper cables and dog biscuits in the same glove box because life is unpredictable. He married Mara 6 years ago. I tried to make it work with her. I'd drop soup at their door when their heater broke, babysit our little Finn on late shifts, sew buttons, hem pants, teach Finn how to whistle with 2 fingers. It was the day after the memorial, with flowers still breathing in the living room and cutlery piled like soldiers in the kitchen, when she said it. No preamble. No please. Just that thin smile, those hands that never learned how to hold a grateful wrist. "Daniel's gone," Mara said. "The house is mine now. You can stay with your church friends or whatever. I need space." "Where is Finn?" I asked. "Asleep," she said. "This is not about him. This is about you leaving." I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I did what all grandmothers who survive revolutions, recessions, and husbands who forget how to say sorry do. I took stock. I have 3 suitcases left in me. I packed none of them. I walked instead to the back room, the one Daniel had turned into a workshop, and I sat on the stool where he'd taught Finn to build a birdhouse out of scrap cedar. "Breathe, Nadia, breathe." We had buried Daniel 2 days earlier. A lone car accident, a stretch of road that always iced early, a skid, a guardrail, the quiet afterwards. The police said it was clean. I said nothing because grief is a foghorn that doesn't come with a switch. Mara had cried, yes, but sometimes grief sounds like something else, like a wooden spoon tapping a mixing bowl of plans. "You can have the guest room for another night," she said from the doorway, arms crossed. "Tomorrow, you should be out. I'll box your things." "Don't trouble yourself," I said. "I know where everything is." "Good," she said, and shut the door like punctuation. I stood when the door clicked, walked to the pegboard where Daniel kept his tools, and pressed my thumb into a smudge of black grease he'd left last week. There was the song he used to hum, an old lullaby I'd sung into a humid June night the year he was born, still stuck in my head like a splinter. And there was the nagging thought, ridiculous but relentless, that something inside this house was pointing in the wrong direction, like a picture frame tilted by a tremor you can't remember feeling. That night, sleep refused me. I made tea in the dark and scrolled through photos on my old phone until the kettle sighed itself out. At 2 in the morning, a message arrived. No name, no greeting, just a link to a listing, the house. Staged. Sunlight brighter than truth. Open house Saturday. The realtor's name at the bottom. My breath braided itself into a tight rope. She would sell it. Of course. She would sell the house while the Roses were still reading the memorial cards. She would pack my dishes into boxes and label them miscellaneous, and keep the watch Daniel gave me on my 65th, because gloves don't feel the difference between theft and tidying. But anger is a tool you must use like a scalpel. Carelessly swung, it cuts the wrong person. So I set it down and picked up my sharpest blade, memory. There is a thing Daniel told me 2 months before he died, over coffee I sweetened with a teaspoon of jam. "Ma, if anything happens to me, call Ramos." He said it the way people say, "Bundle up, it might snow," not the way they say farewell. He'd scribbled the name on a torn piece of paper and taped it inside the workshop's cabinet door. I'd forgotten. That night, I remembered. I took a deep breath, opened that cabinet, and there it was. Ramos, attorney. A number, a street. Underneath, a smaller note. Backups, garage attic, box labeled winter. I watched my hand shake around the phone as I dialed. The voice that answered belonged to a woman who sounded like she'd seen too many sons do brave, foolish things. Ramos Law, she said. I told her my name, my sons, the note, the memorial, the sentence that had tossed me out like dishwater, and she said, "Come tomorrow." Early. Morning poured itself into the kitchen through thin curtains that had survived 3 apartments and 27 years. Mara took Finn to preschool. She left a note on the counter. "Please don't be here when we get back." I made myself a sandwich no one would eat and wrote, on the back of her note, "I'll get my things by tonight." Then I went to find whatever Daniel had felt under his feet that made him write the name of a lawyer on a scrap of paper like a lifeline. Ramos existed. She wore unassuming suits and soft, practical shoes. Her office smelled like lemon furniture polish and old paper that knows where it's going. She didn't smile at me the way doctors smile in rooms where people learn they have less time than they eavesdropped on yesterday. She smiled the way good chess players do when they spot a path 3 moves before you do. "Your son came to see me in April," she said after listening to the outline of my life. "He wrote a will. He set up a trust for Finn and a life estate." She paused, watched me carefully. "He left the house to the trust with you as the life tenant. That means you have the right to live there until you choose not to. And then it passes to Finn when he's of age." I blinked because sometimes information is so clean it feels like lying. "Why didn't I know?" "He planned to tell you after the anniversary," she said, referencing a date I never thought would matter and now meant everything. "He wrote a letter and a video message. He stored them with me and somewhere else," he said. "God forbid," he told me. "But if anything happens to me, I don't want Mom or Finn pushed around." I closed my eyes, turned my face to the window, and breathed in a new kind of air. It smelled like relief and something else, the cool metal of a key slipping into the right lock. "I'll need to file a notice with the registry," Ramos said, already reaching for a pen. "And we'll send a copy to his wife. She can't sell the house if it's in trust and encumbered by her life estate. She can sell the couch if she wants. Not the house." "What about Finn?" I asked. "I don't want him to suffer." "No one does," she said. "We'll be careful. There's no reason for him to know any of this now." "But, Nadia, there is more. Your son told me he thought something was wrong with their finances. He didn't accuse. He asked me what to do if he confirmed bank accounts were being drained." "Drained," I repeated and tasted metal like biting your tongue. "He said he found a second phone bill. A storage unit." He didn't want to believe anything. He said love should benefit of the doubt itself silly, but his bank statements were telling him to stop being poetic. I went home with copies. I went home with a list. I went home with a way to not be thrown out of the life I'd rinsed sweet potatoes in, measured heights on the doorframe in, taught Finn to crack eggs into. And when I reached the house, I walked straight to the garage, leaned the ladder against the rafters, climbed to the attic crawl space, and pulled down a box labeled Winter. Inside, between scarves I'd knit for winters that forgot how to snow, I found a sealed envelope with my name. It was my son's handwriting. I could recognize that slope in a thunderstorm. Inside, a letter. 2 pages. I will not tell you everything he wrote because sons deserve some secrets with their mothers, but I will tell you the sentence that both hurt and helped, if you're reading this. I'm either a paranoid fool or a man who waited too long to tell the truth to people good enough to hold it. Beneath the letter was a cheap flip phone. There was also a brass key with a number punched into it, 512. The phone was charged enough to turn on. It asked for a code. I tried his birthday. No. I tried mine. No. I looked at the envelope again, at the little coffee ring his mug had left in the corner, and heard him humming the old lullaby I'd sung every night the winter he wouldn't fall asleep without holding my thumb. On a guess that felt ridiculous as prayer, I typed 4 numbers, 5-7-1-3. The first notes of that lullaby, if you translate them the way Daniel and I used to when he was 6 and we were turning music into math to make fractions behave, sola do mi. The screen flickered awake. There were only a handful of messages, all within the last 3 months, money transfers, a contact saved under River, a string of voice memos. Thursday night, she took the blue card, found the storage unit receipt. If I'm wrong, I'm burning these, if I'm right. The phone also had a single video. In it, Daniel sat in his truck outside a store I recognized by the peeling mural of an apple basket on the brick. He looked tired, eyes soft. "Ma," he said, and my breath stopped. This is ridiculous, I know. But if I don't have the nerve to say it out loud, at least I'll say it into this. I found withdrawals I didn't make. I found another credit card in my name. I found that we're behind on the mortgage I thought was autopay. Every time I ask, we fight. She says I'm controlling. Maybe I am. Maybe I'm also afraid. If I'm wrong, I'll apologize. If I'm right, and God forbid something happens, there's a folder on my laptop called River. It has everything. I love you. Tell Finn the thing about the alcohol being F. He loves that. I sat on the garage floor and let the video finish. The light in the frame changed from afternoon to amber. When it ended, the tiny screen went black and threw my reflection back at me like a stranger. I could be mistaken. I could be hurting and projecting hurt like a slideshow on any wall that volunteered. But truth has a posture. It stands upright even when you'd prefer it to slouch. I hid the phone in my sweater, put the box back, and went inside. Mara was in the kitchen with a laptop, a glass of white wine, and 2 stacks of assessment forms, mortgage, insurance, and something I couldn't read. She turned the screen toward herself when she saw me. "I'll be gone by tonight," I said, because letting her know she'd predicted something correctly gave me the pleasure of watching her be confident about the wrong thing. "But before I go, do you need help with the dishes?" "I'm fine," she said, and waved me away like a fruit fly. I wished her a good evening and went to Finn's room. In the top drawer of the dresser, beneath the socks I'd bought in a 3-pack with cartoon foxes, there was the laptop Daniel used when Finn fell asleep on his chest, and he didn't want to get up. He used it for email and spreadsheets and to stream documentaries about trains. He had left it logged in. Daniel trusted the world with a child's carelessness. I typed RIVR into the search bar, and there it was, a folder. Inside, a spreadsheet. Names of accounts. Balances. A column labeled Owner. Another labeled Withdrawals flagged. I scanned the entries. Every flagged withdrawal had been made between 9 and 11 at night. Every one came from the joint card. Memo field said Home Goods, Boutique, Cash. There were also deposits into an account I didn't recognize, marked River Savings. A second spreadsheet had a list of items in a storage unit: heirloom silver, stamp collection from Grandpa Yakub, Finn's college fund box. The last one made my stomach twist. I took screenshots. I copied the folder onto a thumb drive I kept with my knitting needles because putting expensive things next to harmless ones confuses thieves and forgetful grandmothers. I replaced everything exactly as I found it. Then I made tea and counted the steps from the kitchen to the front door. 14. I counted them again because counting is a prayer you can say even if you don't believe it does anything. At dawn, I went back to Ramos. "Don't confront her yet," Ramos said after scrolling through everything and watching the video with a face that moved like a clock. "We file for the trust today. I will send the notice to the realtor and the registry. That stops the sale. Then we call the bank. If there's nothing, then there's nothing, and you will both have to apologize to the air around you. If there is something, we do this quietly. Finn is the center. Keep him there." "I'm moving out tonight," I said. "You're not moving anywhere," Ramos said, tapping the deed. "This says you could wallpaper the living room with oranges if you wanted to. But you, Nadia, are going to move through this like a dancer. We will do one step, then the next." I went home and baked bread because the house smelled like lemons and arrogance. I heard the front door open at 3 in the afternoon. Finn's voice came in like sunlight. "Baba, we made turtles from egg cartons. Mine has googly eyes." I didn't cry. Instead, I stuck 2 olives into the loaf I'd shaped into a smiling turtle, and Finn clapped like applause. On Friday, the realtor called. I know because Mara answered the phone and walked to the backyard, the way people do when they have conversations they don't want walls to overhear. I turned on the sprinkler for Finn. Water arched over the lawn like a half-finished rainbow. The backyard smelled like cut grass and summer and something else I couldn't name yet. Saturday was the open house. She had not bothered to tell me this, but the staging company did. Men came with plastic booties and neutral art. A woman measured the spice rack like it could contribute to the sale price. Finn and I went to the park until 3 so he wouldn't ask why strangers were in his bedroom pretending they live there. When we came back, a man I'd never seen stood on the porch. He wore a shirt unbuttoned one too many and sunglasses inside, a habit that always says more than the person wearing them intends to. He called Mara baby and carried a vase to the trash with a face like chores were beneath his contract with the world. He left when he saw me. He didn't say goodbye. Mara met me at the door and tried to hand me a brochure. "We're considering offers," she said in a voice you use when you want the person in front of you to prove they can't possibly understand the magnitude of what you're doing. "I've made arrangements for your things. I can drop them at the church." "The house is under a trust," I said as gently as I could. "And there's a life estate. The sale can't go forward." She stared like I had spoken in a language she heard in a nightmare once. Then she laughed, small and unpleasant. "Daniel wouldn't do that without telling me." "Ramos filed the paperwork," I said. "It's done." There are moments when you can see someone choose a future. She chose cruelty because it looked like control wearing a nicer coat. "Get out," she said. "Finn and I are about to make cocoa," I said calmly. "Would you like some?" She knocked the brochure against her thigh like a metronome that thinks furious tempo. "You're impossible." "I am," I said. "It's one of the few reliable things about me." The realtor canceled the open houses last hour. The next morning, a courier left a packet on our doorstep for Mara, notice of the trust filing, the life estate, a request to produce financial records concerning joint accounts. She read the first page, skimmed the second, and cracked the spine of the packet like it was a bone she could put back where it belonged with enough pressure. I wanted to tell her she had a choice. But sometimes warnings sound like insults, even when they're soft. So I made pancakes with Finn instead and let the kitchen smell like a promise. The following week contained 3 hours that changed everything. Hour 1. Finn's teacher called to ask if I could bring in the turtles we'd made because Finn won't stop telling everyone his Baba is the turtle queen. I left the house at 9, carried a bag full of egg cartons, and laughed when it made me look like a thief of recycling bins. Hour 2. While I was gone, Mara called a locksmith. The locksmith called me because Daniel had told him once that I was the person to verify entry when they were away. I told him to wait. I drove home faster than I should have, carrying paper turtles like fragile contraband. When I arrived, the locksmith stood on the porch with a look that said he regretted answering this call. "Ma'am," he said, "I need authorization to change locks." I showed him the trust filing and the life estate barely 30 hours old. He tipped his cap and told Mara he couldn't do it. She called him a word not allowed in nice kitchens. He left. She threw the realtor's brochure into the rosebush and went inside to make a phone call that lasted 10 minutes and sounded like someone knitting a trap. Hour 3. A bank officer named Selena called Ramos. Then Ramos called me. Then, all 3 of us sat in Ramos's office with a stack of bank statements like a pile of fallen leaves you know you shouldn't burn. The account labeled River Savings held deposits that matched withdrawals from Daniel's business account. The listed owner was Mara under her maiden name. The pattern was painfully consistent: late-night transfers after fights, debit purchases in stores with generous return policies, and cash withdrawals on days when Finn's preschool bill was due. Ramos didn't say, "I'm sorry for what you're about to learn," which I appreciated. She just laid out options like squares of cloth. "We can file for an accounting," she said. "We can seek an injunction on distributions from the estate until it's resolved. And, depending on what we find, we can speak to the authorities. But again, Finn is the center. He must not be pawn or weapon." I nodded because there is a way to lose your son and still refuse to lose your soul. "Move forward," I said. That night, I heard the whisper of keys in the front door at midnight and the careful steps of someone trying not to be heard. I heard murmurs, a laugh, a hush. I got out of bed, moved quietly, and did something I was proud of even as my heart pounded with a rhythm that did not feel mine. I placed the cheap phone from the attic on the hallway table and pressed record. When the voices moved toward the kitchen, when the light clicked on, when the stranger's footsteps, his footsteps, crossed the line into my house, I stepped into the doorway. The man from the porch froze. Mara dropped her handbag. The light above the sink made everyone look like theater actors surprised mid-scene. "Good evening," I said. T? He looked at Mara. Who is this? My mother-in-law, she said through teeth. Current life tenant, I corrected, more gently than she deserved. Why are you awake? She shot back. Because I'm old, I said, and smiled in a way that did not fight. We sleep in segments. Go to bed, she said. I will, I said. After I ask you one question. I held up the phone. Did you open a savings account under a name that isn't yours legally anymore and fund it with money that wasn't yours wholly? She held my gaze and did not blink. You need help, she said, choosing condescension like a proven recipe. Probably, I said. But even unhelped, I can read numbers. The man decided to be brave. You can't keep her from selling this place, he said, saying what cowards always say, a half-truth. He took a step toward me. I took a step back, not out of fear but out of a habit. Give space to men who confuse proximity with power. This is harassment, he added. We'll call the police. Please do, I said. I'll serve tea. His jaw turned into a small engine. Go to bed, Mara said again, but softer. There was fear in it now. Not for me. For herself. She had come to this kitchen new with choices. Now the choices had eyes. In the morning, Ramos filed the accounting request. The bank froze the questionable account pending verification. The realtor stopped answering Mara's calls. And I baked another loaf of bread because calm is a muscle you have to use if you want to keep it from atrophying. 1 week later, the Memorial Fundraiser's website sent an automated receipt to Daniel's work email. I saw it because he'd forwarded all financial correspondence to a shared folder in his system. A donation had been refunded at the donor's request after noticing suspicious transactions by the organizer. The organizer was Mara. The transactions? A rental for a lakeside cottage and a purchase from an online boutique in a city where we do not know anyone. I printed the receipt and felt old in a way grief hadn't made me yet. Then I opened my phone and saw a new message. The realtor's assistant, apologizing for any confusion, asking if I could please sign a release form. I laughed alone in the kitchen and wrote back no. 1 syllable, heavy as a door. The hearing for the accounting landed 2 weeks later. While we waited, Ramos suggested we do something I thought was unkind until I watched it save everything. She suggested we schedule a small remembrance gathering at the house and invite Daniel's friends, neighbors, and the few family members still within driving distance. Not to make a scene, she said. To make a community. I sent texts. I bought paper plates. I sliced fruit until the kitchen looked like a painting of abundance. Mara didn't object because objecting to people remembering your husband is not a flavor of villainy most people will eat. She kept to the hallway, texting. People came with stories. The time Daniel shoveled 5 driveways in one night without telling anyone. The time he taught a kid down the street to fix a chain without making him feel foolish. The time he made us all laugh by dressing as a traffic cone for Halloween and directing the neighborhood's trick-or-treat flow with a headlamp and a clipboard. We laughed and cried. Vin wore his turtle hat. Before dessert, I tapped my glass. The room quieted, as rooms do when someone ready to tell the truth has found her voice. My hands trembled, but my words didn't. I want to play something Daniel left for us, I said. He meant it for me, I think, but I'm old-fashioned. If a son leaves you truth, share it. I set my laptop on the counter, connected the little speaker Ramos loaned me, and tapped play. There he was, in the truck, the apple basket mural behind him. The room inhaled together. Daniel spoke. No accusations. No ugly words. Just a man who wanted to love and be loved and be fair while living all 3. He said he worried about money. He said he might be wrong. He said he loved us. When the video finished, I left a bead of silence on the table like a folded napkin. Then I clicked open a folder and projected the spreadsheet onto the wall. Names of accounts. Dates. I share this not to shame, I said, careful, but to stop a thing that is not honorable from growing legs. Mara took a breath like a diver who knows the water isn't kind. You can't do this here, she said, voice shaking. This is cruel. This is the truth, I said gently. Cruel as telling a grandmother to leave the house her son protected for her less than 24 hours after he's buried. The room did not gasp. It formed a shape around us that looked like a harbor. The man from the porch had not come, Cowards are allergic to communities that aren't theirs. Our neighbors spoke, one by one, soft as people putting chairs back after a play. We're here, we'll help. What do you need? What I needed, I realized, wasn't their testimony. It was their presence, filling the house with witness. Shameless lies prefer empty rooms. This one would have to settle for a chorus. The next day, an officer from the Financial Crimes Unit called Ramos. He had reviewed the bank's report. He needed statements. He needed copies of the fundraiser receipts. He needed the recordings. We'll proceed slowly, he told her. There's a child. Ramos looked at me like she was handing me a fragile heirloom. We won't make decisions when angry, she reminded me. Even righteous anger misfiles things. 2 more weeks pressed themselves into the pages. In that stretch, the middle of our story blossomed into days I would later tell myself to remember in detail, because they taught me who everyone really was. Mara floated between rooms, tethered loosely to the house she couldn't sell anymore. She started rinsing plates a little longer, scrubbing the edges that never bothered her before, as if she could polish the past. She stood at Finn's doorway most nights, watching him sleep with an expression I first mistook for regret and later understood as hunger for a life she could still choose. Ramos showed me her edges too. Over tea in her office one rainy afternoon, she told me her father had run a tiny grocery that survived on trust and lists on a clipboard. He taught me that a community ledger is stronger than a lock, she said. People sign their names in how they behave. She wasn't trying to impress me. She was telling me what she believed law could be when it wasn't busy pretending to be only punishment. Selena, the bank officer, turned out to be the kind of woman who buys the same cardigan in 3 colors every fall and uses a pocket calendar with a tiny pen tucked into its spine. She called me to explain every step the bank took, not because she had to, but because she understood that uncertainty is a draft under a door. It chills you even when the thermostat says you're fine. She told me gently that sometimes people get in over their heads and think water wings look like designer handbags. We try to throw them a rope, she said. But we don't pretend water is air. The detective, Holloway, wore scuffed shoes and spoke in a voice built for calm rooms. He never touched anything in our kitchen without asking. He did a magic trick for Finn with a penny, made it appear behind his ear, then looked at me to make sure it was okay to do a second trick. When he left, he washed his mug. I can't fix what happened, he said once at the door. But I can stop more happening. And me? The middle asked me to be more than a person waiting for a gavel. It asked me to be patient when patience looked like weakness, to be firm when firmness felt like cruelty, to be kind to myself in the tiny hours when you measure your days with spoons and the drawer feels empty. I started walking at dawn, circling the block in a bright scarf so drivers would see me. I greeted the widower on Maple with his 3-legged dog. I collected the stray grocery carts that drifted to the end of our street after windy nights, rolled them back to the store as if order could be wheeled into place. The hearing arrived on a Monday that rained like it had been waiting 2 months to remember how. The judge was small, precise, and possessed the calm of someone who irons their own shirts. Ramos spoke, Mara's lawyer spoke, statements lay in stacks. I sat on a bench with my hands folded, a grandmother whose sense of self had been forced to learn new furniture. The judge ordered a full accounting. He froze distributions from the estate until verified. He acknowledged the trust and the life estate without flourish. He scheduled a follow-up in 30 days. It was, Ramos said later, the exact result she'd hoped for. Boring success is a kind that holds. When we walked out, Mara approached me in the hallway where the echo made footsteps sound braver than people feel. Are you happy? She asked, eyes red. You've embarrassed me. Truth embarrasses itself less, I said. All of this, she gestured wildly, you've poisoned everything. I've poured water on a fire, I said. And I will not let Finn inhale smoke just because I should be polite. We stood in a silence that knew too much. Then she said something I am glad she said out loud so I didn't have to carry an assumption. I never meant to hurt him. I believe you, I said. But intention isn't a mop. She left through the doors and into rain that made the parking lot look like slate. We went home to bread dough rising under a towel. The neighborhood rallied in the way neighborhoods do when given specific verbs. Mr. Patel from the corner store saved the cardboard boxes with the sturdiest sides for us because he knew I was reorganizing. The Dennings 2 doors down walked our recycling to the curb on weeks I forgot what day it was. Teenagers came by to fix the loose fence panel that creaked like a violin with a bad bow every night at 2. People sent screenshots of texts, dates, receipts. The fundraiser platform reached out for documentation. The bank compiled statements. The officer from financial crimes visited once, twice, made notes, thanked Finn for showing him the turtle with the wonky eye. Every adult who entered our house knelt to talk to him like his height didn't announce his importance any less than ours did. There was one thing left, a small lock I had not been able to pick, the storage unit. The brass key Daniel left had a number, but no address. I stared at it one evening while Finn built a fortress out of couch cushions, and then I remembered something, the flip phone's contact labeled River. I pressed call. It rang. It went to voicemail. A woman's voice, warm, tired, said, "You've reached River Storage on Palm. We close at 6. Leave a message." It was 5:30. "Finn, shoes," I said, and we drove into a sunset that understood drama. The woman behind the counter watched Finn march to the candy bowl like he'd trained for it, smiled, and asked what she could do for me. I slid the key across the counter, contextless. "My son rented a unit." She looked at the number. Her face shifted in that small way faces shift when they spot someone's likeness on an old coin. "Oh," she said. "Daniel. He was nice. He helped me move a broken shelf when my coworker called in sick. He kept smaller things here. Not furniture." "May I see?" I asked. "As long as you're on the lease," she said, and pulled up the account. Her brows nodded. "He listed 2 authorized users," she said. "His wife. And you." The unit was small and clean and held what felt like 1,000 Thursdays, a crate labeled Finn Art, a box of tools, a stack of notebooks, a safety deposit box nested in a larger plastic bin, a suitcase with half a rolling pin sticking out, the heirloom cooking set. I reached for the notebooks first, because paper keeps the warmth of the hand that held it last. In the top one, Daniel had written lists. Make appointment with Ramos, buy Finn new rain boots, ask M about missing check, change will to trust. A page later, if all wrong, burn. If any right, keep safe. I opened the safety deposit box. Inside, a neat folder with copies of receipts and a thumb drive. I didn't cry. The mind can run out of tears and still produce salt in the throat. I took pictures. I packed nothing. Leaving things as you find them gives you time to make plans that aren't simply reactions. On the way out, Finn chose a red lollipop and told the woman his turtle's name was Potato. This is how life insists on being life. It gives you sugar in the midst of somber errands. Back home, I put the thumb drive next to the one from the River folder. I wrote a note for Ramos with bullet points and dates, because clarity is kinder than passion when you hand over evidence. Then I slept, finally. The last turn of the story came faster than any of us expected. A detective visited with 2 uniformed officers and a folder like the one Ramos carried, only heavier. He sat in our kitchen, accepted tea, and said quietly, "We've completed an initial review. There's sufficient evidence to charge Mara with fraud related to the fundraiser and questionable transfers. We've also found someone using a joint credit line to open accounts without proper consent. We will proceed carefully. We will make sure Finn isn't present for anything. I'm telling you this so you aren't surprised when we ask you to bring him to your sister's tomorrow after school." I thanked him with the kind of gratitude that sits down because it can't stand yet. When they left, I called my sister, who lives 2 neighborhoods away and believes in greens you can't overcook. She said, "Bring the boy. Bring his turtles." I didn't tell Finn everything. He is 5 and deserves to think adults learn from mistakes before they make them again. I told him we were having a sleepover, that Aunt Mila had a new blanket with stars on it, that we'd stop at the bakery for the cookies with jam in the middle he likes because they look like eyes. The next day happened in the sequence the detective had planned. Finn and I watched cartoons at Mila's while the adults in uniforms did their jobs not as a show but as a procedure. Mara called once, twice, and then not at all. Later, I learned that she was calm when they arrived, that she asked to call a lawyer, that she walked out without looking at the roses. I did not rejoice. I baked bread. The hearing that followed the charges was not a spectacle. The judge spoke in syllables like carefully stacked coins. He ordered conditions. He allowed supervised visits. He forbade access to certain accounts. He scheduled dates. It was, Ramos said, as fair as these things can be and the most protective of Finn. The estate moved under the court's eyes. The trust held the house like a hand holds the small of a child's back in a crowd, steady, unobtrusive, unarguable. Time, which had refused to behave, began to keep better manners. Months passed. Leaves turned, fell, returned. In the long middle that most stories skip, we all changed. Finn started first grade and learned the capital of states I've never seen. He brought home a seed in a paper cup and insisted we water it only with moonlight water, which he defined as tap water poured while the kitchen light was off. It became a bean sprout that reached for the window like it was listening for music. He started tapping the notes of our lullaby on the table before dinner, 5-7-1-3, as if calling his father to the meal like grace. I began to write those numbers on small slips of paper I tucked into his lunchbox on hard days, under the sliced apples. He'd come home and press the paper to his chest before setting it on the fridge with a magnet that says, "Be gentle with your beans." We didn't buy that magnet. It came free with potting soil. Wisdom sometimes does. I learned to fix small things I had always saved for Daniel. I replaced the broken switch plate he kept meaning to get to next weekend. I patched a drywall nick shaped like a comma. I watched videos on how to clean the dishwasher filter properly and marveled that we had been washing dishes in soup flavored like their own complaints. Every fix felt like lighting a candle in a stairwell. Ramos, freed from our emergencies being daily, checked in on us as if we were clients and neighbors both. One day she arrived with a bag of citrus and said, "My mother always made marmalade in winter. I never learned, and I regret it." I put the kettle on and taught her. She cried when the sugar boiled into beads. "It smells like all the women in my family who didn't have time to write anything down," she said, then laughed at herself for crying. Later, she stayed for dinner and told Finn stories about courtroom cats who know which bench is the warmest. I watched her shoulders drop an inch the way shoulders do when they remember they can. Selena invited us to the bank's community day. They had balloons and a table where a teenager explained saving accounts to smaller children using jelly beans and little jars. "This jar is for now," he said. "This jar is for later. This one is for someone else." Finn put 3 jelly beans in the someone else jar before the boy finished his sentence. "For Baba," he said. I ate one and put 2 in my pocket to forget, and then find too late and laugh. Even Mara changed in ways I had not expected. At the community center where her visits were supervised, she read to Finn from a battered book about a cat who wanted to be a baker. She never once used our situation like a lever. She asked about school. She told him when she messed up her recipe. She cried exactly once when Finn showed her a drawing of our house and she said, "It's still home to me too." The volunteer in the room wrote something on her clipboard and smiled without showing teeth. Later, Mara handed me a folded note at the door. "I am trying to be the person he thought he married," it said. "If you hate me forever, I will understand. But if there is a thin rope we could both hold for Finn, I'm willing to hold it." I wrote back, "For him, yes." The middle deepened in other ways too. I found a box of Daniel's college papers in the storage unit, the essays he'd written on the ethics of algorithms, and the marginalia, where he argued with himself in the margins. In one, he'd underlined a sentence 3 times. "Fairness is not a feeling, it is a practice." I taped that to the inside of the pantry door where I keep the spices I reach for most. It helped. I also found, tucked into the pocket of an old denim jacket, a Polaroid of Daniel and Mara the week they moved into the house. Their faces held that particular newness couples wear like a bright scarf they think will suit them forever. On the back, in Mara's looping script, the words, "We did it. We are home." I sat on the steps and looked at that looped "we" for a long time. People are not only their worst day. When the fraud case concluded, it was quieter than anyone expected. The agreement required restitution paid over years with a budget monitored like a heartbeat. There were community service hours at the thrift store the fundraiser had promised to help. There was a class on budgeting she had to take and proof she had to file monthly. There was no prison, because not every bad choice needs a cell to teach it to be a better choice. Sometimes it needs daylight. The judge said, "We will measure progress in receipts and in choices." Mara nodded, eyes steady. The house stayed ours, not mine, truly, but ours, held for Finn like a linden tree you plant for shade you will never use as long as the child will. I kept my life estate like a vow, not to spite, but to tend. We painted Finn's room pale blue with glow-in-the-dark stars he arranged to match a map from a library book. He insisted we put a sticker moon in the corner by the closet so Night can rest when it gets tired. We left it slightly crooked on purpose. Imperfection is a signature. On the anniversary of Daniel's passing, we invited the neighborhood again. Fewer people came because time is a sieve. But those who did brought salads, stories, and patience. Before we ate, I tapped my glass and told them a version of what you already know, minus the parts a child doesn't need. I thanked them. I meant it like a person means water in the desert. Mr. Patel told Finn that his father had once carried a bag of dog food home for a stranger when the handle broke. He didn't ask where I lived, the man said, wiping his eyes. He just said, "Point." Finn smiled with his whole face and said, "That's because he had strong arms." I nodded. He did. After they left, Finn and I lay on our backs in the living room and looked at the stars we'd stuck on the ceiling. "Do you think Papa can see us?" he asked. "I do," I said. "And I think he likes that you named your turtle Potato." He would have laughed. Finn was quiet. Then, "Baba." "Yes, love." "Why did Mommy tell you to leave?" "Because fear. Because pride. Because grief can make you push the wrong person toward the door. Because adults forget to ask for help when shame stands in the kitchen shaking its head. Because we do not always know how to hold the weight of life with two hands." Instead, I said, she was sad and scared. Sometimes grown-ups make wrong choices when they're both. We try to fix them. Like when I broke the blue bowl and said I didn't, he said. "Exactly," I said. "We had a talk. You said sorry. I said I still love you. Remember?" He nodded. "You made pancakes after." "I did," I said. "I made pancakes after." He rolled toward me and put his small, warm hand on my arm. "Can we make pancakes tomorrow?" "Yes," I said, and watched the stars glow. Endings aren't doors that shut. They're porches where people sit until the evening decides what color it will be. The months unfolded into years that taught us how to wear our lives without tugging at the hems. Finn discovered he liked numbers the way some children like dinosaurs. He'd come home breathless about prime numbers and insist we count oranges in groups that made him grin. He used our lullaby as a code to remember his locker combination in second grade. 5-7-1-3 became 17 to 31 in a way only his brain understood. And he explained it to me with diagrams that made my head tilt like a dog hearing a whistle. "Math is music that sits down," he told me. I wrote it on a sticky note and put it inside Daniel's notebook. He grew taller than the doorframe pencil marks. When he outgrew shoes, he put them by the storage closet with a note, "For someone else." He started a lemonade stand one June and taped a jar labeled "Community" to the table. He gave half his earnings to the library for bean seeds. The librarian cried at the desk, then pretended she wasn't crying by rearranging bookmarks. He learned to whistle louder than me, then softer on purpose, because the baby next door woke easily. Ramos came to dinner every other month. She brought cases that made her sigh and cases that made her stand straighter. "Sometimes people ask me if I love justice," she said once, spooning stew. "I tell them I love fairness more. Justice is a finish line. Fairness is water." When she said water, I thought about that night in the kitchen when the man in the sunglasses thought volume could do what truth does better. I poured her another glass. Selena retired from the bank and started volunteering at the community center, where we took our jars to label with someone else. She taught a class called Warm Money, where she used grocery store analogies to explain interest rates to people who thought their finances were a weather pattern instead of a map. She asked Finn to be a guest speaker once. He explained jar math to a row of men who had never been praised for the way they listened. When they clapped, he bent in a bow that was 90% drama, 10% pride, and 100% Daniel. Detective Holloway stopped by the year Finn lost his first tooth and left a coin the size of a laugh under his pillow. From an official agency, he wrote on a note, "The Tooth Bureau." He drew a stamp in the corner and a tiny badge. He didn't sign his name. Mara served her community service hours folding sweaters into squares and teaching herself to swallow apologies in small sips. She took the budgeting class twice, the second time not because she had to, but because she realized learning is not indictment, it's invitation. She got a job at a bakery that needed someone to come in at 4 to feed the starter. She learned the language of dough, how it sighs when it's ready, how it sulks when it's cold, how it forgives if you're patient. She stopped bleaching her hair and let it be the color it had always wanted to be. She bought 3 sweaters from the thrift store because they felt like honesty. Our rope stretched between us, thin but strong. We held it for Finn. When the supervised visits ended, the first unsupervised one was at the library with a librarian who pretended not to watch. Finn returned glowing because he and his mother had discovered a shelf of books about turtles and a poster for a summer reading challenge that promised a pencil shaped like a rocket ship. "We each get one if we finish 20 books, he said breathless, as if pencils were currency. Maybe they are. The day the estate finally settled, Ramos brought over a single sheet of paper for me to sign that acknowledged the end of the court's watch. It felt like stepping off a boat onto a dock I had built plank by plank without knowing if it would hold. We stood in the kitchen, the place where most of this story conducted itself in whispers and paperwork and tea. "It's done," she said. "The house is the trust's, your life estate is recorded, and everything else has found its ledge." I wanted to ask her to stay for cake, for marmalade, for the kind of chat that lies down and takes off its shoes. But my chest felt tight in a way I recognized from winters when the cold reached inside the lungs. I sat. She frowned, then was beside me, her hand on my wrist. "Nadia?" It passed, but not before she made me promise to see a doctor. I did, the next week. The doctor said my heart had opinions about my age and the weather, and that I should listen. I started walking slower, breathing like a person who believes oxygen is a friend, not a favor. I told Finn. "Are you going to die?" he asked, direct as all children who've been introduced to the word too early are. "Not today," I said. "Not from this. But one day. A long time from now, if I get my way. Until then, we practice living." "How do you practice?" he asked. "Pancakes," I said. "Jars with beans. Being kind even when you're irritated. Being irritated and not pretending you aren't. Letting people help you move a couch. Helping people move a couch. Saying sorry when you're wrong and when you're not sure yet." He nodded like a person receiving instructions for a recipe he intends to cook for many. Okay. Years turned toward their own endings and beginnings. Finn turned 12, then 13. The turtle named Potato lived longer than internet articles predicted and died with ceremony in a shoebox lined with a dish towel. We buried him under the linden tree. Finn made a grave marker from a river stone and engraved Piotr with a nail. Mara came and brought a bouquet of marigolds, the small suns I planted the year everything tried to collapse. She cried. We cried. Then we told ridiculous stories about a turtle who never took life personally. When Finn turned 16, he got a job at the bakery where Mara had learned dough math. He came home dusted in flour, smelling like mornings. He learned to braid challah and to not flinch when customers were in a hurry. He brought home a loaf still warm and said, "Now I understand why you bake when you're mad." I smiled and taught him how to fold anger into dough without letting it knead you back. He learned to drive in Daniel's old truck, the one with the apple basket mural somewhere in the margins of its story. We left the radio off and talked about the things people talk about when they're in a moving box protected from eye contact. We talked about forgiveness. We talked about the difference between excuses and reasons. We talked about the invisible work of choosing not to make someone else pay for a bruise they didn't deliver. He asked smart questions. He asked dumb ones on purpose to make me laugh. He ran yellow lights that were too close to red once, and we stopped the car in a parking lot and breathed until our hands stopped shaking. Learning is a corridor. One evening, we returned to a letter on the doorstep addressed to me in a hand I knew, Mara's. Inside, "Nadia, I don't deserve your patience. I know this. If you can ever say out loud that you forgive me, I will not ask you to, but I will put the words somewhere safe like a pressed leaf. I am not the person I was in your kitchen. I am trying to return every penny I disrespected. I am trying to be a better mother. I am trying to be a daughter-in-law you can stand in the same room as and not feel your throat tighten. If there is a list I can follow, put me on it. I will check every box. I sat with that for days. Forgiveness isn't a switch. It's laundry you do over and over and one day find you don't mind folding. Eventually, I called her. We met at the park bench where Finn had once insisted the ducks could read if we gave them easier books. I told her I forgave her in the way old wood forgives weather, not by forgetting the storms, but by staying a bench anyway. She cried in that quiet way people cry when they don't need anyone to notice. She thanked me too many times. I told her to stop or I'd make a joke and ruin the moment. We laughed, and it didn't feel untrue. When Finn graduated high school, the house filled with relatives who remember him as a bean sprout in a paper cup. We put up a banner crooked on purpose. Ramos came with a bouquet of rosemary because it means remembrance and also because it is delicious with roasted potatoes. Selena arrived with a card that said, "Proud of your jars." Detective Holloway sent a note with a doodle of a badge and a penny taped inside. Mara stood on the porch and watched Finn accept a hug from everyone and then from her. He said, "Thank you for my lunches," to me, and then, "Thank you for my mornings," to her. She nodded and didn't swallow a sob. She released it like a small bird. After the guests left, Finn and I stood in the workshop where this story keeps returning to put a hand on the doorframe. He said, "I've been accepted to the state college. They have a program for data science that looks like a map I might want to walk." I held his face and said, "Go. Make fairness a practice." He moved into the college dorm with sheets he pretended didn't excite him and a poster of constellations he hung slightly crooked to keep night comfortable. He came home on weekends and ate my pancakes like a person who appreciates syrup more because the week told him about schedules and laundry and cafeteria potatoes that needed help. The house learned how to be quiet again without being lonely. The day he turned 21, he sat at the kitchen table and read me an essay he'd written about our lullaby. "It's a key, Baba," he said. "But not just to phones. To people. Because codes don't have to lock. They can open." He'd written about Daniel without making grief a spectacle, about Mara without making shame a stage, about me without making me better than I am. I listened and felt like the linden tree had finally given us shade we recognized as ours. Years later, when my hands began to tremble as if remembering an old song and my knees composed opinions about stairs, Finn came home with a box of sticky notes and labeled every drawer so a future with less memory would still know where the cinnamon lived. He brought me a plant that thrives on neglect and a schedule that forgave me for forgetting it. He set reminders on the stove that sing instead of beep. He wrote our lullaby's numbers on a card and stuck it to the fridge. He added, in pen, a fifth note, "2, for luck," he said. For new songs. We sat on the porch that evening and watched light do its trick with the linden leaves. Mara came by with a loaf from the bakery and a jar of jam she made herself from the recipe I had once refused to share because I thought recipes were proof I had been here. She had written on the lid, "Fairness is a practice." I put it on the shelf next to Daniel's underlined sentence. We are all, in the end, a practice. This house is. This family is. Justice arrived in boring stacks of paper, but the real triumph was smaller. A boy who grew into a man who thinks jars belong to communities. A woman who learned to measure spending with the same care she measures flour. An old grandmother who stopped packing her life into boxes because someone else's fear told her to, and instead packed evidence and bread into a day that included enough goodness to make room for truth. I still have the flip phone, charged once a month, sleeping in a drawer next to measuring cups and rubber bands. I still have the thumb drives, labeled in my tidy writing. I still have the brass key with the number punched into it. I keep it on a nail above the stove because it reminds me that ordinary things often unlock the most important doors. Sometimes, late, when the house is full of those small noises only houses that hold love and history make, I sit in the workshop on that same stool and hum the lullaby. I press those 4 notes into the wood, 5-7-1-3, like a code anyone kind can learn. I think about how delicate truth seemed before I picked it up and realized it was heavy and sturdy and willing to be carried if I simply would. I think about Daniel's video, how softly he spoke. I think about how strength can be as undramatic as filing the right paper with the right name on the right day. I think about how revenge is a poor word for what I did because it sounds like fire and what I chose over and over was water. I think about how, once, someone told me to pack my things and leave, and how I stayed, packed nothing but evidence and bread recipes, and left only the door open for accountability to walk through. And when I am done thinking, I stand, turn off the light, and go to bed in the house my son built into a promise for a boy who knows
My grandmother told me this story. Thanks for watching this video, like and subscribe. Bye bye!